Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, and we will cover verses 8 to 10, that is 3 verses, reflecting on the psyche of hypocrisy, which is called munafiqat in the Quran. These are the references, and all excerpts in this talk are taken from the meanings of the Quran, volume 1. And this is our contact. Recap previous presentation in which we covered only one verse, 7, and the topic was azab. There are two ways to live life on planet Earth, either to live life under the man-made systems in which the laws made by one man or a group of men at the top are meant to be obeyed by the remainder, or to live life under the system defined by the wahi of Allah and now preserved in the Quran until the end of time. And presently in this world, there is no system which is being managed under the wahi of Allah, that is the Deen of the Quran. All systems are man-made, that is human beings make laws and other human beings follow those laws. If life is lived under the man-made systems, then mankind will face all those problems in the world which we can witness clearly today in the world of 2024. Which is created under the guidance of the pure, unbridled human intellect. And this thing we should keep in mind, that the world which we see around, if human mind could create a better world, it would have. So all the issues which we find over there, this is the best human intellect can do. And in fact, with the passage of time, such systems deteriorate and another system then takes its shape. This human intellect can be the one which has rejected the guidance of the Quran, and this is called Kufr, or it can be that intellect which mixes the man-made laws with the values of the Quran, or that intellect which is clueless about the divine guidance. The outcome of this intellect will always be the same, i.e., the state of different azabs in the world. The Quran offers us the roadmaps for both systems, i.e. the man-made one and the one based on Deen as a system. These systems are diametrically opposite to each other. Under the system of Deen, human life prospers and develops in this world continuously and acquires the ability to transcend physical death to continue its eternal journey in the next life. So under the man-made system, human life in most cases ends with death, except for those who are working and striving for the system of Deen. That is, they are following the path of Sirat al-Mustaqim. Now, an overview of today's presentation. Due to human beings having choice and intent, we make all kinds of choices in life, and these impact our own psyche as well as the psyche of others with whom we interact. And that is an important point for us to register, that since we make choices and we make decisions, all these choices and decisions affect our self, our psyche. Here the Quran has drawn our attention to another important facet of human behavior, where people say one thing from their lips while having something else in their hearts. And this is something which we are going to discuss today. Those who opt to become Momineen are informed never to just trust people based on their words, but to judge the behavior and conduct over a period of time. Under Kufr, people state clearly that they do not like the guidance of the Quran. Hence, they reject this option in their life. In this case, the Momineen cannot be deceived as they become aware of the choice of a Kafir. Because if somebody straight away tells us that I do not accept this message of the Quran, that is fine. But if somebody says that I accept the message of the Quran, but in their heart they do not, then we have a problem. Those who outwardly accept Eimaan, but their heart does not, or as in the case of those who declare themselves to be Momineen and are accepted to be Muslims by virtue of simply being born in a Muslim's family and possessing a Muslim name, but have not actually accepted Eimaan in their heart, are also included in this category. And this is a very important point to understand, that people who are born Muslims, but they are not Muslims as defined by the Quran, then we are deceived. People who are on this path and who have accepted Eimaan need to understand this, because these are the issues of recognizing human psyche and what kind of psyche one has when people reject the message of the Quran or do not accept it in their heart. The Quran here presents a clear-cut criterion for our guidance, as not following it leads to going astray. So Quran is inviting us to put in very profound reflection in what it is saying. We have to analyze it in detail in terms of solving human problems and acquire that psyche which can understand these problems and then tries to solve it. And obviously we cannot solve the problems in case we do not understand these problems in the first place. If this criterion is not observed strictly, then the system of Deen can never be established because Momineen meeting the precise Quranic criterion cannot emerge. The Quran has declared this inconsistency between word and deed as a psychological disorder, which leads to problems at the individual as well as at collective level. Now let us go to the first verse of today's presentation, verse 8, another category, incoherence between word and deed. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. These are those two categories who either openly accept the reality or openly reject it. Now this is from the previous verses where Eimaan and Kufr were explained. The third category is of those people who say from their lips that we have conviction in the truths of the code of Allah and we have Eimaan in the law of requital and the life of the hereafter, but they do not in reality have Eimaan in these. These people are either emotionally superficial or opportunists and fair weather friends. Hence, you can never place your trust in the companionship of these people. See how categorically explains Quran about the state of human psyche. And we will see that some other psyches will also turn up as we proceed through this surah. Next slide. Eimaan is not about saying a few words with the tongue. The common translation of this verse is, of the people there are some who say we believe in Allah and the last day, but they do not really believe. In this translation, if we replace belief with the acceptance of Eimaan, then this points to another facet of the human psyche after Kufr. We have gone through this aspect that merely saying that I believe in something is not enough. Eimaan is conviction, which uses both our mind as well as our heart. That is our intellect as well as our emotions. Intellect means that we understand the need and desire for it. And emotions means we have enough motivation to pursue it. Because without motivation, we cannot do anything in the world. Whatever decisions we make, these have to be accomplished by motivating ourselves. So that is the relationship between intellect and heart. If we take it in order in which the Quran has drawn our attention, then it will mean that those who willingly accept Eimaan in order to become muttaqi need to understand the second pitfall of worldly life, i.e. the mentality of those people who claim to have Eimaan, like the Momineen, and declare it as well. They say this to the Jamaat-e-Momineen, and it is in plural. And that is the beauty of the Quran. And we should be able to differentiate whether this verse is addressing one person or it is addressing a collection of people. That they are in fact not Momineen and belong instead to the state of Kufr. Why is this the case? Because they have not accepted that precise concept of Allah and the life of the hereafter, the accountability of the self, which is noted and described in the Quran from beginning to the end. This further means that only those who have brought about this change within themselves will understand this aspect as it relates to the aspects of change which the human self undergoes after accepting Eimaan. So which means that when we accept Eimaan, there has to be a change within us. And if the change hasn't taken place and not clearly checked with the signs which are given in the Quran, then essentially our Eimaan is not acquired. So this is important because Eimaan is acquired over a period of time through carrying out salih deeds and working with those who are also on this path. This is inbuilt in accepting the Eimaan. Just merely saying that I have Eimaan means nothing in the language of the Quran. Eimaan has no shades. Either we possess it or we don't. The important aspect in this verse is the coming to grips with this fact that when the message of the Quran is shared with others by those who have accepted Iman, they need to be aware of the potential different responses of their fellow men. The statement made here is a fact of life, or is true, which can only be understood by those who have Iman themselves. Otherwise, this verse will not make sense, since the psyche trying to understand it will be contaminated itself. It's a very important point and a very delicate point. We need to understand that unless we have acquired Iman, then this verse will not make sense, because we exactly know that what this conviction means to us, what changes it has brought within our outlook, how we are now viewing the world. Do we understand that what problems this man-made system is creating, and why do we want this system, which maybe we are beneficiaries of this system, despite that we want this system to be replaced for the good of wider mankind. So it is an important point that the change which we experience after accepting Iman within us is the best way to judge what this verse is saying. Examples of this human psyche are demonstrably visible under the domain of the sectarian versions of Islam, where people are divided among themselves due to possessing this outlook. The evidence for this is that they remain far away from those bounties of life which are meant to be available to those who opt for Sirat-e-Mustaqim. Owing to this kind of psyche, the dream of establishing the system, Deen, falls outside their grasp intellectually as well as practically. We know that the Quran puts a lot of emphasis on removing differences, and differences can only be removed when people work with one ideology in mind. Whether it is an evil ideology or a good ideology, whatever ideology they have and they have common interests, then they work together. And that is important. And sects simply cannot disappear if human beings are not guided and they are not willing to accept Iman, which is given in the Quran. Because Quran says that once you become Momineen, then your hearts become united. The Quran has defined 5 constituents of Iman: Allah, the Malaika, the books, the messengers, and the hereafter. In this verse, it is stated that these people say that we have Iman in Allah and the hereafter. Some people with a superficial understanding think that since these people are claimants of Iman in only 2 out of the 5 constituents and leave aside the other 3 constituents, this is the reason why the Quran has stated that they are not Mu'min. And that is not a correct inference from this verse. Issue of the constituents of Iman. This is the flawed understanding. The question here is not about 2 or 3 constituents out of 5. Undoubtedly, the constituents of Iman are 5 according to the Quran, and we can look at this verse 177 of Surah Al-Baqarah. But its style is that at some places it only mentions one of these constituents, at some places 2, and some places 3, and some places 5. But at every place, its objective is always 5 constituents. For example, at one place it has stated, in the case of those who say, our Rabb is Allah, and further, stand straight and steadfast, the Malaika descend on them. And over here, only Iman in Allah is mentioned. And that is important, because what is following over here is that they say, our Rabb is Allah. And when Allah is there, it means all his attributes are inclusive in this very statement. And Rabb is one of his attributes, which is related to the system of Rububiyyat, and which deals with the means of sustenance. Any who have Iman in Allah and the last day and work righteousness shall have their reward with their Rabb. So in this verse, 2 constituents are mentioned. One is Allah and the last day, just like verse 8. And then there is another verse, so have Iman in Allah and his messengers. So over here, Iman in Allah, one constituent, and the second one is messengers of Allah. In another verse, Quran says, have Iman, therefore, in Allah and his messenger and in the light which we have sent down. So 3 constituents are mentioned, that is Allah, his messenger, and the Quran, or the wahi which is sent down through these messengers. So this is the way we look at these verses. So it's not a question of 2 having Iman in 2 constituents, and that is why these people do not have Iman in their hearts. That is not the issue. Issue over here is that their psyche hasn't changed and they are making a deliberate decision to deceive others. And of course, they deceive themselves, and this will become clear in next two verses. It is clear that the meaning of verse 2:8 is not that since these people only accept these two constituents of Eimaan and not the rest, therefore they cannot be Momin. Here only two constituents are referred to, but all five are implied. There are such people who acknowledge that they accept the constituents of Eimaan but are not Momin. Next slide is Eimaan and deeds are intrinsically linked. While discussing the topic of Eimaan, it has been stated earlier that the Quran also mentions such people who they are included in the nation of Muslims. Despite this, they are not Momin. From this, it also means those people who are called Muslims by birth as well as those who do not have firmness in their Eimaan. In other words, though they are claimants of having Eimaan in the truths of the Quran, their deeds are contrary to the Quran. And that is an important point, because if we say that we accept certain constituent or certain laws of a country and we do not obey them, that means we literally disobey and do not accept those laws. Similarly, in the case of the Quran, if we say we have Eimaan, then that Eimaan should bring a change within us so that we are motivated to do salih deeds in order to make further progress towards establishing the system of Deen. So Quran puts forward a procedure before us. For example, it is stated in Surah Yusuf, and most of them have no Eimaan in Allah without associating partners with Him. Very important point, because this is related to the concept of Allah. Because each one of us have a self, and that self needs a higher model. We cannot have another human being as a model, because then we will become like those human beings. So under the man-made system, people have human beings as their models. Whereas the Quran is asking that make Allah and His attributes as our model, so that we have to carry out all those duties which Allah has taken on Himself. He is asking us as His companions to carry out those duties in the human world. And the problems which we see in the world is because we do not have any system of Deen and no Momineen which can carry out those responsibilities in the world on behalf of Allah. Details of this will be covered at its own place, where it will be explained what it is that is termed shirk. And we have gone through this shirk previously as well, which means we associate others with the laws of Allah. And this is the state of Muslims, particularly in the world, who mix up some values of the Quran and the man-made system, and as a result they remain backward, because they never acquire that psyche which can carry out these duties which are meant to be carried out under the system of Deen. They simply cannot establish the system of Deen because they do not have that outlook, that vision, that mind which can carry out these duties. And how Muslims remain incriminated in shirk despite being claimers of having Eimaan. According to the Quranic standard, they cannot be called Momin, because they are contaminating Quran's formula. Quran presents before us a very precise formula, very precise recipe. We simply cannot tamper with it. It is like if water's molecule is H2O and we try to introduce another molecule of, for example, hydrogen or oxygen in it, then it is not water anymore. So Quran's formula should be viewed with that thing in mind, that its formula simply cannot be contaminated. And the psyches which want to carry out this system of Deen, their minds should never be contaminated. It's like a virus. If the virus is there, then the computer will not function. It is actually declared about the Momineen that it is those who have Eimaan and then do not mix their Eimaan with zulm. And that is another important point added over here, that if we are trying to acquire that psyche which we want to be able to understand the system of Deen and work for the system of the Quran, then we should not be doing any justice to anyone. We shouldn't be even thinking of it. And that is how then our self keeps developing, because then we understand that what is going on in our head and what are we going to do with it and what is our decision making. And it's a gradual process. That is why Quran says stay together. They accept Iman and then do not permit this Iman to be contaminated through zulm. And zulm we know means injustice. When something is meant to be at a place and it is not there, then it is zulm. For example, every human being in the world should be respected. And if any human being is disrespected, then it is zulm. For example, Quran says, do not have yatim and miskeen in your word. And if you have yatim and miskeen in the word, then it is an unjust word. And people who are doing that are also unjust. Zulm causes Iman to go to waste. So first stage is to understand these things. That is why Quran says that you should make an effort to understand that what is happening to your fellow human beings in the world, how they are treated unjustly. When the time for the manifestation of results arrives, then no good will it do to a self to have Iman in them then, if he did not have Iman before, nor earned righteousness. And the words used over here are kasabat, which is related to deeds through its Iman. This means that the Quran does not accept Iman without deeds as being Iman. Now we go to the next verse, verse 9. By not following the Quran, man lives a life of self-deception. يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. These people play tricks with the divine system and the Momineen who are establishing it, and think in their own minds that we are deceiving them. Even though if they use their intellects and consciousness, this truth would have become clear to them that they themselves are keeping their own selves in deception. And we know from our previous discussion that whatever we do, we actually do it against our own self. We think we are doing it to others, but while we are doing harm to others or good to others, we are also being affected in terms of our own self's development. Next slide is deceiving Allah is deception against Momineen. And that is very interesting because Momineen and Allah become one in terms of establishing the system of Deen. The common translation of this verse is, fain would they deceive Allah and those who believe, but they only deceive themselves and realize it not. Because basic issue is that we cannot deceive Allah. Allah is not even visible. And only people whom these people can deceive is Momineen. And over here, Quran is dealing with this psyche of theirs. Now the situation becomes very serious as this state of the human mind is viewed as displaying deception against Allah himself. And since the Momineen is working as the companions of Allah, hence this cognitive outlook of these people is considered to be a serious display of weakness of the human consciousness. And important thing is that whatever is happening in this world is not at random. It is following precise laws of Allah, and there are scales fixed for everything which we do. And if we keep that in mind, then we will understand what Quran is trying to put forward before us. We can also see the inadequacy of this translation, which is substituting the word belief for Iman. And belief is a very vague term because belief may be based on something which is not a fact, because a lot of time people believe because it suits them to believe. For example, under the domain of religions, people have concocted some kind of concept of God, and mostly it is related to the way human system functions, a dictatorial concept, and that is the belief they have. And with that kind of a faulty belief, how can their mind work properly? And that is why they don't find any attraction in the message of the Quran. We should compare this translation with the meanings shared earlier. These people deceive Allah and the Momineen, that is the divine system. Now the matter has become clear. A Mu'min is one who has Iman in his heart and also Iman on his lips. A Kafir is one who has Kufr in his heart as well as expressing it through his tongue. But this third category is of those people who, even though in their hearts they do not possess Iman, in order to deceive, they say via their lips that we have accepted Iman. One of the things which comes to mind is that this verse is revealed at a time when there was system of Deen already established on ground. So if we take it in relation to that, then this verse will even make more sense. Because we are dealing with this verse and trying to expand its meanings when the system of Deen has not yet been established. So if people tell us as students of the Quran that they have Eimaan, but they do not have in their hearts, it has very little consequence. The point to reflect is that if these kinds of human beings control world affairs, then the world will be exactly that which we see in 2024, where unpredictability and conflicts are prevalent all across the earth. So if we look at this verse in terms of hypocrisy in general, then we can see that it is equally applicable to people who are managing the affairs of the world under relative values. Now, next slide is being aware of the harmony between word and deed. In other words, there is a coherence between the heart and the tongue in both Eimaan and Kufr, a mutual harmony with Haqq and truth in Eimaan, and a mutual conformity between the heart and Batil in Kufr. But when there is no harmony between the heart and tongue, then such an individual remains neither a Momin nor a Kafir. In Quranic terminology, this individual is termed as being a Munafiq. For the dictionary meaning of Munafiq, see the interpretation of verse 3, which we covered in one of our previous presentations under Yunfikun. That is, Mimma Razaqnam Yunfikun. Under Yunfikun, we covered it in some detail, where it is explained that a tunnel in which the path to enter and to exit are both open is called Nafakun. When a wild rat makes its hole, it digs numerous tunnels in order to exit and covers their openings with a thin layer of soil. And when it senses some danger from outside, then it escapes through one of these concealed tunnels. Every single one of these tunnels is called an-nafakatu. It is clear from this that an individual will be called Munafiq who, before entering some system or society, checks first of all where the hidden escape routes are. In other words, he will not be sincere even when he is entering the society. He will be a deceiver. This is why the Quran has stated that these are those people who deceive Allah and the Jamaat-e Momineen. So if the system of Deen is established or is being established and it has acquired some kind of a shape, then these things become very serious, because all human systems work through human hands. And if there are people who are not sincere to the establishment of the system, then we can imagine how much problems these people can cause. Now, next slide is yukhadi'un Allah wallazina amanu wama yakhda'una. So yukhadi'un word is explained over here. Here the word khudaun is used to mean deceiving. The meaning of this root is to outwardly manifest contrary to whatever is in the heart, to do evil to someone surreptitiously. Because if one is doing evil openly, then of course there are consequences. One has to do it surreptitiously, quietly, in a secret way. Its meanings emerge clearly before us from the vivid way in which Arabs used to use it. The fame and good manners of Arabs were based on their hospitality. They lived in deserts. For them only the milk or meat of cattle could be the constantly available commodity from which guests could be hosted. Hence they would generally offer milk to a traveler arriving among them. And just imagine if guests enter a tent and the she-camel giving milk is tied up outside, the host goes to milk the camel, but she fails to produce any milk, then what will be the state of that host? Of course, in this case, she-camel will not be a Munafiq, it's just an animal. They used to call such a she-camel Hudun. From this, it is evident how a Munafiq deceives that party in which he is included, i.e., he is extremely untrustworthy, and it can never be said about him when he will next deceive. So being let down at the last moment, and that is the point being made over here. Similarly, they used to call a path which outwardly appeared to be leading towards the destination, but in truth was against it, as Khaidaun. Similarly, they also called a mirage as Khidaun. Even that dinar, which looked to be legal tender, but after checking was found to be false, was called Khadiun. That bazaar in which the rates of things keep changing every moment, i.e., now one, now another, is called Sukun Hadiyatiyun. And this is interesting because the whole word of today is Sukun Hadiyatun, because there is nothing certain and everything keeps changing. And we can see, for example, the currency rates, they keep changing every day. From these meanings, this reality will become apparent that the people who are now going to be described, i.e. hypocrites, what their characteristics are and how they can become the cause for the destruction and disintegration of the society and system in which they are included. Because there is nothing certain in these societies. Even in families, if husband, wife, or father and mother, they keep changing their opinions every day, then that family becomes hell for the children, because they don't know what father is going to do next, or mother is going to do next, or both are going to do next. Just a couple of verses after this, the Quran has stated that these people are kazib, i.e. liars. But the Quranic meaning of kazib cannot become clear by just saying liars. And now we will explain that. Meaning of kazib. The Quran itself has made this clear in such a way that after this, there is no need for any further clarification. An individual is not in possession of the correct knowledge about some event, but whatever he knows, he narrates it as such. This description of his cannot be termed as being true because it is contrary to the event, but that person will not be called kazib or kazab. Because we experience this, a lot of people say certain things which are not true, but they genuinely explain that because that is the level of understanding of theirs at that point in time. In contrast to this, let us see who is called Kazib according to the Quran. In Surah Munafiqun, it is stated, when the hypocrites come to you, that is to the messenger, they say, we bear witness that you are indeed the messenger of Allah. Yes, Allah knows that you are indeed his messenger, and Allah bears witness that the hypocrites are indeed liars. A very powerful verse stating a fact. Note here that these people are saying such a thing which is actually based on truth. Allah himself verifies that this is indeed true. But despite this, he declares that those who are saying this are liars. From this, it is evident that according to the Quran, the one who is called Kazib will be the one in whom the heart and tongue are not in mutual harmony, i.e., there is one thing in the heart and something else on the tongue. These are the ones whom the Quran terms as hypocrites, i.e., those people who do not have Eimaan in their hearts, they only say it to deceive. Because once the system of Deen is established in some form, then these people want to have all the benefits associated with that system without making any commitment to it, and whenever they will get any opportunity, they will harm the system. What it means to deceive Allah. In their own minds, these people think they are deceiving Allah and the Jamaat-e Momineen, but in actual fact, they are deceiving themselves, their own selves. And it's a very clever system, the way human beings have been created, that whatever we do, it affects our own psyche. And that is something which we should carry from this presentation today, that whatever we do has impact on us, whether short-term or long-term. Not anyone else, but they do not comprehend this at the conscious level. And that's another important point over here. What is conscious level? And we'll discuss it in following next slides. The reason they cannot deceive Allah is because he is so knowledgeable and omniscient that he is even aware of the thoughts passing through the hearts and the tricks of the eyes. Therefore, who can deceive him? And the reason that they cannot deceive the Jamaat-e Momineen is because the Quran has described at various places such signs of the hypocrites in the light of which no one who possesses any vision can be deceived. And that is an important instruction for us as students of the Quran, that we should be in a position not to be deceived by anyone in the world. It is possible that they may deceive someone for a short while, but after this, when the false veneer slips off, they cannot do it again. Such people cannot deceive on a permanent basis those men who possess intellect and awareness. Because with the passage of time, the students of the Quran then become Momineen, and then they come together, they form a Jamaat-e Momineen and start working towards the system of Deen. And Quran has cautioned all of them right at the beginning, right at the start, that this is how you should develop yourself and be conscious of it. And after developing their own self, they exactly know what kind of a self is suitable for the system of Deen and which self is telling lies. Now the question remains of how they deceive their own selves. For this, the Quran has stated something so comprehensive and profound which can be understood through the psychology of today. The Quran has stated that there is a sickness in their hearts, and that is noted in the next verse. Now we go through some issues of human psychology, the issue of human psychology. This question about where is the center within man for understanding and thinking, that is intellect, and where is the center for perception of feelings, continues to be discussed since ancient times, and it can only be said that scholars have not reached any definite conclusion in this regard up until now. Intellect and feelings are considered to be two separate categories, and their centers have not been identified with certainty. And the case even today is the same, because unless people come to the Quran, all of these simply cannot find the answer, because a lot is linked with divine energy, which provides us choice and intent. And divine energy is invisible, and they are looking it in human brain. Some time ago, psychologists had devised and adopted the term mind, which was thought to be the confluence of intellect and feelings. But a short while later, they found that this status of its was also based on a misunderstanding. From this word, the adjective mental was created. On the one hand, this was related purely to the brain, just as the place for treatment of mental diseases is called a mental hospital. And on the other hand, it has been declared to be linked to feelings, just as a diseased mentality does not mean mental diseases, but psychological disorder. And psychology nowadays has developed into a full-fledged science where it has a number of subfields. Psychologists have devised another term which is called the psyche, and it is translated as the human nerves or self. But until now, it has not even been able to be ascertained as to what it actually is. Now we go to the next verse 2:10, linking verses 8 and 9 to this verse. فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. The outcome of this kind of life of emotional pursuits and deceits is that their heart and mind loses its healthy balance. And it is the law of Allah that the more an imbalanced mind remains busy in action, its balance will keep becoming distorted to the same extent. And we can see the example of this, the practical example of it, that people who start abusing power in a higher echelon of any country, we see that with the passage of time, they become worse. In order to fulfill the needs of following this path, they have to resort to lies at every step and wear a new cloak at every turn. Just imagine what a painful hell their life remains in as a consequence of this. Azabun Alim, which is noted in this verse over here, caused by lies and hypocrisy. All man-made systems contribute to this, and we can witness it in 2024. I've highlighted 3 places in this verse. Fi qulubihim maradun, that is in their hearts is a disease, and fazadahumullahu, and Allah has related to himself that Allah keeps increasing it, their marad, their disease, and walahum azabun alim. And why they suffer in this azabun alim? Because alim is the punishment or the destructive effects of fear, huzn, anxiety, grief, distress, regrets, disappointments. Every negative emotion will be covered under this alim, bima kanu yaksibun, because they are doing kazab, they are liars. So it has consequences. Now next slide covers qalb and fuad, heart and mind, and these 2 terms are used in the Quran. Qalb is used over here, and subsequently we will come across some verses where fuad is used. In the Arabic language and in the Quran, 2 words, qalbun and fuadun, appear for this purpose. If a superficial line of differentiation is to be drawn between the 2, then it can be said that qalbun is the source of understanding and vision and intellect and reasoning, and fuadun the origin of emotions of sorrow and anguish, which is from the root which means frying, i.e. anger and anxiety, sorrow and anguish, pain and grief. So that is why the example of fire is given over here. But this is also not a definite line of distinction. The Quran has also noted about qalb that it is a source of reflection and contemplation. For example, qulub, from which they do not make use of intellect and reasoning. And it's worth looking at these verses. I've quoted some of these verses in these slides, and we should open up a copy of the Quran and look at these verses, not only these, but verses before and after as well, just to get the right context. But on the other hand, at one place, qalb is stated to be an abode of peace and contentment, and at another place, an abode of love and mercy. For example, Quran says, and we ordained in the hearts of those who followed him, that is the messenger, Isa alayhi salam, compassion and mercy. In another verse, it is called qalb salim, a sound heart, and at another place, qalb munib, which is a devoted heart. And all these people have to acquire themselves by making an effort after acquiring Eimaan. At another place, melting under the influence of strong feelings, and at another place, hearts becoming hardened like a stone. And these are very interesting verses as well, that how hearts become stone and how do these people manifest their tyranny to the outer world. And we can see the examples of this in the case of, for example, Gaza and Palestinian people, how they are being treated. And of course, these people who are resorting to this kind of tyranny have their hearts become of stones. And on the other hand, it has also termed Fuad as a center of intellect and reasoning at places, and elsewhere as a source of emotions. Just a point that all these verses which are quoted over here, we should try to look at these, because when we make an effort and look at these, our self also develops. Because making an effort on this path leaves an impact on our heart, and we prove to ourselves that I'm serious about the system of Deen, and I'm serious about what is contained in the Quran, and I'm willing to work as the companion of Allah on this path. Now, continuing on this verse 210, from these details, it is clear that the Quran has not specifically and definitively declared about qalb and fuad which one of these is the center of the intellect and which one is the fountainhead of emotions. But it has stated this about the hypocrites, that they have sickness in their hearts. Moreover, it has stated about the Quran that in it is a healing for the sickness of the heart. And verse 1057 we covered in some detail under Surah Yunus. It is worth going through this verse from our previous presentations. A lot is covered over there in terms of CBT as well, that is cognitive behavior therapy. It is evident from these verses that by diseases of the heart is meant psychological dissonances and disintegration. In the Arabic language, the basic meaning of maradun is a disturbance in balance and equilibrium in such a way that there is debility, weakness, or deficiency in some strength. Based on these explanations, there is a sickness in their hearts will mean a disturbance in the balance of heart and outlook, or psychological conflict. And this is the problem. If our mind is suffering from uncertainty and conflict and dissonances, and we are creating problems for other human beings, then we cannot be of much use to the outer world. We will be making mistakes and also all the time living under uncertainty within ourselves. And we will not be able to devote our best to the outer world and its achievements. And this is the state of the whole of Muslim Ummah, that these people are suffering from these kind of psychological disorders, and as a result, they are extremely backward as compared to those who have secular minds. This is what will be called a diseased mentality, or such an unbalanced personality which is suffering from various kinds of contradictions or complexes. And our mind is not, what Quran is saying us is that our mind is not meant to have contradictions and complexes. It should be a totally free mind. And when our self is following the self of Allah and following the Quran in terms of divine attributes, that is, manifesting those divine attributes and making efforts within the permanent values, then this mind gradually becomes totally free from all kind of contradictions and complexes, and we can imagine how much strength it gains for the benefit of the system of Deen. 1400 years ago from today, terming hypocrisy as a psychological disease could only be the marvel of the Quran. This slide will deal with some part of consciousness. And over here, what I've done is that it covers all three verses, because these three verses are interlinked with each other. In fact, the next set of verses is also part of this discussion which we are carrying it today. And when the next part, they are not conscious of it, Wama Yasharun, is combined with this, then the matter becomes even more profound and refined. Arabs used to call the comprehension of something through the senses as consciousness. What the Quran has stated is that hypocrites are victims of one such psychological disease whose diagnosis cannot be made through sense perception. And this is the beauty of the Quran, that it has gone right into the finest parts of human consciousness and pointing to that. The psychology of the modern era has divided the human self into two parts or levels, which is conscious mind and unconscious mind or subconscious mind. The roots and causes of psychological diseases are buried and hidden in those vaults of the unconscious mind where the gazes of the human consciousness, i.e. sense perception, cannot reach. If we go through these verses few times and try to relate it to our own mind, and particularly if we have managed to acquire the Quranic Eimaan, then we will get the differentiation, the distinction between the previous state of ourself and the new state of self. Because we will know that what kind of weaknesses were residing in our mind and how we have got rid of them now by using the Quranic value system. The Quran has stated that a hypocrite is a patient of one such psychological disease whose roots and causes his consciousness cannot reach. This disease is psychological and its treatment is also psychological. By referring to this aspect of Wama Yasharun, Allah has laid bare before us an important aspect of our cognitive contents which need to be analyzed to recognize these proclivities of hypocrisy. This will need to become an important part of education and training under the system of Deen. Parents need to grasp this aspect in order to increase the self-awareness of children. And from today's presentation, and of course the previous presentations as well, we can help our children right at a younger age to understand that how their mind works, and we should help them to only allow those concepts, those values to go into their mind which can develop their self. And this is an important point, because we all know that how much effort we have to make to get rid of all those wrong beliefs with which we were born and we were brought up, and how difficult it is to point the attention of others to these problems. And if they do not do this, then they are of no use to the system of Deen of Allah. Next slide. Allah has revealed Al-Haq for all times. Now reflect that when the Quran has stated about itself that the means for the diagnosis and treatment of psychological diseases are contained within it, then to what depths of realities has it reached by this? And what kinds of hidden aspects has it invited human knowledge to reach and placed emphasis on? It has stated about its own implicit realities that soon will we show them our signs in the farthest regions of the universe and in their own selves, until it becomes manifest to them that this is the truth. And we should not wait for another 100 years to know these things. All these things are placed within our immediate grasp. We will keep unveiling these signs of ours which are hidden within the domain of the human self and within the universe. Our efforts over here are more related to human self. Of course, we should know those as well while we are working with our own self, until every proclamation of the Quran appears in front as an established reality. The signs dispersed within the outer universe are those which are becoming uncovered through sense perception, that is, through scientific research and discoveries. The era of discovery of the hidden realities in the domain of the human self has now begun. As man continues to progress in knowledge about human psychology, who knows what hidden realities of the Quran, by becoming uncovered, will keep appearing. And that is the focus of our attention on this platform, that let us find out what is kept within us as latent potentials and how many of those we can discover before we leave this world. It is evident from this that in order to comprehend the truths of the Quran, it is essential that the level to which human knowledge has reached should be in the sight of those who are thinking and reflecting in the Quran. And this is the very reason that reflecting and reasoning in the Quran cannot be restricted to any era. nor can any era or individual make the claim that his scholarly conclusions about the Quran are the final word. And of course, we can figure out all details of human psyche which are related to the system of Deen which can be established in the present era. And that is our focus at this point. But of course, human consciousness, human mind, and its vastness will keep expanding with the passage of time. Next slide is understanding the nafs holds the key to comprehending the Quran. In this discussion of words, it is necessary to understand that the Quran is not a book of logic or philosophy, that it should become entangled in the amplification of the complexities and points of the terminologies of these topics. But we can understand if we develop ourselves and increase our understanding about human psychology and what the Quran is telling us, then we can understand the weaknesses and drawbacks of human philosophy and their use of logic. Its language is Arabic, therefore the general meaning of its words are the same as those meanings in which the Arabs use them. Although where it uses these words in the form of terms, then their meanings become specific. The words qalb and fuad have been used taking their general meanings, whereas the word nafs is its special term which it uses for that force which is the source of human decision making and because of which man is declared to be responsible for his deeds. And it's a tremendous force, and we only realize its importance fully when we follow the Quran and what Quran is telling us and providing us the guidance regarding multiplying this force within us through Eimaan. The meanings for which it has used this term of its will be described later in the discussion about nafs. There you will observe that this is a very comprehensive and unique term of the Quran, and no single word of any other language can interpret it accurately and completely, not even the terms psyche or self of modern psychology. We can look at the books by Allama Pervez like Human Self and Allah, Human Self and Iblis, and also the life in the hereafter, what does it mean? And it is also, I think, covered in Islam, a challenge to religion. We also use the word self or ego or personality merely for the sake of making it comprehensible. These words also cannot be an alternative or synonym for the Quranic term nafs. After these fundamental and introductory explanations about the hypocrites, it is important to note their particular and distinguishing signs which the Quran specifically describes. Next slide is understanding various aspects of the human psyche is part of the study of the system of Deen. In the verse under view, that is number 8, those people are mentioned who say that we have accepted Eimaan, but they are not Momin, i.e. there is Kufr in their hearts and the words of Eimaan on their tongues. And they do all this in order to deceive. In other places, the Quran has elucidated this in these words, who say we accept Eimaan with their lips, but whose hearts have no Eimaan. These same words have been reiterated in verse 3, 167, and in both places it is stated that they are nearer to Kufr in comparison to Eimaan. It is stated even more clearly that though they are in reality Kafir, they pretend to be Momin with their tongues, and that is very harmful because they can deceive Momineen, particularly those who are new to this Jamaat. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, it is stated, when they come to you, they say, we have accepted Eimaan, but in fact, they enter with a mind against Eimaan, and they go out with the same, but Allah knows fully all that they hide. And wherever Quran says Allah knows, it means Jamaat-e-Momineen needs to find it out. And it is the duty of Jamaat-e-Momineen who have already trained themselves to train others, educate them, and to help them develop their self. Next is hypocrisy is a form of Kufr. When they come to you, they state that we have accepted Eimaan, but in reality, even though they come, it is with Kufr, and when they return from here, it is also with Kufr. And we can see that from a human point of view and the importance of time, what loss they are causing to themselves. Because whatever we do over here is going to affect ourselves in terms of the life of the hereafter. But they keep this Kufr concealed within their hearts. Say to them that Allah is acquainted with even your hidden secrets, therefore which of your affairs can you hide from him. And gradually, of course, once Momineen find out all these things, then they are going to confront them with their ill deeds. Because of this concealed kufr of theirs, they are called brothers of kuffar. And Rasulullah is enjoined, O Nabi, strive hard against the kuffar and the munafiqeen, that is hypocrites, and be firm against them. And I have highlighted this. This is very important because we should keep in mind that it is human beings who cause harm to each other. And if we let these people get away with their crimes, then forget about the system of Deen. The system of Deen will come down tumbling if we do not recognize and then eliminate and get rid of these people, keep them away. Let them live, but they should not be included in the decision-making process. They are all part of the same flock. At another place, the Quran says, in Surah Al-Baqarah, it is stated, when they meet those who have Eimaan, they say, we have accepted Eimaan. But when they are alone with their evil ones, they say, we are really with you. We were only jesting. And we'll be covering this verse in our next presentation. When these people meet Momineen, they say, we have accepted Eimaan, but when they meet secretly with their mentors, they assure them that when we mix with these people, do not think by this that we have aligned with them. We are in reality with you. We are only jesting with these people. And in today's world, we can see how intelligence agencies work and all these spies work. So this is part of understanding whole of human man-made, that is man-made system and its weaknesses. Concluding remarks of this today's presentation, we have seen that merely accepting Eimaan and doing some solid deeds is not the end of the journey on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. In fact, that is where all the challenges start, but we should keep in mind that students of the Quran are never alone because they are working as partners of Allah, as junior partners of Allah, as Quran has said, Allahu waliyul lazina amanu yukhrijuhum minal zulumati ila nur in Surah Al-Baqarah. Indeed, this is the beginning of the eternal journey of new life in the light of the Quran. Here the Quran has guided us on the immense problems which the darkness of hypocrisy leads to creating in the world. If we look at modern politics combined with media propaganda and the machinations of the capitalist system, we witness the state of the human mind on a continuous basis. Modern terms which are utilized as an alternative to hypocrisy include diplomacy, and we all know it, and there is the word die over here too, duplicity, doublespeak, and I was going through it today. I googled it, and for example, they will never call Department of War, they will say Department of Defense. And under this Department of Defense, they carry out conflicts and wars in every part of the world. Deniability, which means say something which you can deny later on. And this is a common type of conduct of politicians. Forked tongue, divide and rule, might is right. Under might is right, human beings can do anything. They can make black white and white black, i.e. those who possess power can do anything. We need to watch our interests, and we also listen to these kind of phrases that we should watch our interests, but then who is going to watch the interests of the poor in the world? And that is the question which should arise in our mind. We should be very critically and analytically looking at every statement which is made on media, every statement we read in the newspapers, and that is how our intellect develops and becomes useful for the message of the Quran. For example, national interests, deliberate lies covered by manufactured consent, tempered religious books. And these tempered religious books, we can go through some of them and find out that what kind of minds have written these books. They are terribly derogatory and in some aspects evil even. Economic hitmen in the garb of IMF and World Bank. Land grab going on in Palestine is part of this phenomenon. All these are being practiced under man-made systems in every part of the world. This is that disease which is rampant in the body politic of the world, and the Quran is the only recipe from Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth, for this disease. And remember, Quran has said, Tansurullaha yansurukum, that if you help Allah, then Allah will help you. And over here in the religious world, we keep praying to Him and asking Him for help without helping Him. So that is the point which we should keep it in mind from today's presentation. And finally, what I've done over here is just to remind ourselves that what is going on in the world, just to get a glimpse of it. Momineen need to know with Kufr and Munafqat rampant, this is what happens in the human world. This is Gaza, and we can see all the destruction. There used to be buildings over here. Just imagine that how much effort these human beings had made to erect these buildings and had started living in them. There was gas, water, facilities under that. There were children living over there. And what happened to all of them? Who destroyed them? The people who have hearts of stones. And this is what this verse is telling us, that they say something else and have something else in their hearts. And this is Syria, and this is going on for some time now. And this is Gaza, and we can see an explosion taking place, and many houses must have disappeared. Many human beings, living beings, must have disappeared with their meat stuck to the walls. And this is Ukraine. There was absolutely no need for this war, and this war has been triggered for a certain purpose. And the interesting thing is, all those who do this, they themselves are going to die. They are quite happy to hasten the death of other innocent people, but they also should know that they themselves are going to die. And this is something interesting in terms of human psychology. And poverty and media, and here is a lady who is now getting something out of the misery of these children and taking their photograph, and then she will post that photograph in some newspaper to get some money out of the misery of others. Future of humanity. Now we see these kind of pictures, and we should keep reminding ourselves, if we are the serious students of the Quran, this is what Allah wants us to do. These are His creation, His human beings whom He calls yatim and miskeen, for whom we have to come together. Of course, first we have to acquire Eimaan, then as a consequence of that Eimaan, we do salih deeds, develop ourselves, understand Kufr, understand Munafiqeen, come together, unite our hearts, and then we should expect that Allah will, as per His law, give us some help. And refugees, these are on US border, and you can imagine what happens to them. Why they have left their countries? Because there are regimes imposed on these countries who are tyrannical, coercive, and as a result, because of their bad policies, they have to leave their homes. And Quran says very succinctly in Surah Al-Ma'un, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. And this is, we should try to remember it by heart, that have you seen someone who is falsifying Deen? That is, such a person can never ever be able to establish Deen. فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمَ, because he is the one, the people like him are the ones who create yatim, and they are the ones who create miskeen and do not arrange means of sustenance for them. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.